Good evening, everybody. I'm so happy you all could join us this evening. I am here with a wonderful debut author, Deborah Clark Vance. Her new book is Sylvie Denied, which also, by the way, not only a fun book, but a gorgeous cover, if you can see that. Oh, fabulous. And I'm going to do a little bit of Q&A with Deb this evening before we open it up to audience questions. So I'm going to start out very easily for you, Deb, and tell all of us why your book is a must read.
Ha. I think it's a must read because it mirrors the times we're in. The times we're in now reflect things that began in the 70s, which is when it's set. Especially the situation of women's rights, the way, I guess the Me Too movement, there are the roots of the Me Too movement there. A lot of the political questions of today. And plus, okay, I'll just leave it at that because I know you have more questions.
No problem. So tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you become an author? What led you to this?
Well, since I was a kid, I always knew that I'd be a writer. I have a family of writers, my mom, my uncle, my grandfather. But I just didn't know what or when. And it started when I wrote The Lonely Easter Bunny when I was in second grade, which was a rhyming ballad, which I could recite for you, but I think I'll spare you that. And then I had teachers who would praise my writing in sixth grade, seventh grade. And then in high school, there was a teacher who invited me into a new creative writing class she started. After that, I decided I didn't want to get a writing degree because I wanted to have things to write about. I thought if I went to college and completed a writing degree, I'd be writing about going to college and getting a writing degree. So I decided to, go explore the world.
Okay, very good. So tell me then, so how long have you been writing overall from, let's say, the time that you got out of college? Have you just continued doing that, writing your whole life, your experiences?
Well, first of all, it took me 13 years to actually graduate because I did take off. And then in the 80s, I was writing freelance magazine articles. Then I worked briefly in television. I thought, the best place to be a writer would be TV, which is where I know Jonathan from originally. But that whole division of public television, educational television in Maryland ended because of budget cuts. And I eventually went and got a PhD. And then my writing for a long time was academic, was research. I published some research and so on. I don't know if that covers it all. I forget your question.
Yeah, very much so. So talk about the main characters in this book. What makes them tick? And let's try not to give away too many spoilers, for those who haven't finished reading the book yet.
The main character, Sylvie, is a young woman. It's a coming of age story of Sylvie, who, for one reason or another, doesn't think she's getting the full story of what's actually going on in the world and feels like she's got to figure it all out by herself. And I don't know if it's a spoiler to give that away, but I mean, that's part of the story is why is she in that mindset? Part of it too is her personal search. So not only is it what the truth of what's going on in the world, but also who is she? How do you figure out who you are in society, especially in those days, if you're a woman? There were a lot of expectations, as I think probably every woman in the room, we can call it that, in the Zoom, understands that there are expectations and restrictions on what a woman can be and can do. And so she is going through it in that time, way more than now, probably multiple times more than these days, but we're still not out of the woods. There were restrictions everywhere she turns. So that's that character. Do you want to know? I can never remember the question by the time I answer it. So
no problem. So, what motivated you to take on this particular book then?
well, the idea of figuring out what is who you are and what is culture telling you who you are, or society, if we want to use that. So where is the line between your conscious awareness of who you are, like your internal sense of self, and the messages you get from society? That's a topic that's always fascinated me. I mean, since I was pretty young. Yeah, it's pretty young. Maybe more. I mean, young enough that I annoyed a lot of people by asking, probing questions of, why do you do that? Why do you think that? What do you believe? They'd usually tell me, shut up and have a Coke or, have a beer, depending on how old I was.
So talk to me a little bit then about the writing process. So I understand the book took you a few years to write. Yeah.
Mhm.
What was your process through that? Are you an outliner, or did you just kind of dive right in, or?
Well, I'm not an outliner. I forgot to mention, I was writing short stories for many years and submitting them and getting encouraging rejections sometimes. And sometimes when they were based on something that actually happened, I'd get a rejection that said, this is way too outlandish. It could never happen. So unfortunately, we can't use it. And then, at a certain point, I just thought, this is ridiculous. So, but I kept all those stories. And when I started writing this book, I used some material from then, but also I had been writing a novel in the 90s. I'd gotten pretty close to being finished. And then I thought, this sounds pretty hackneyed and everybody else is probably writing the same thing at this point. So I just dropped it. And I cannibalized some of that. So here I had pieces of short stories, pieces of a defunct novel, and then other stuff. And then I started piecing it together. And I wish Medina were here, because I think she said she'd be here if she could figure out how to do it, but apparently she hasn't. But she and I we were a writing group, just the two of us mostly, for the 3 years that I was working on this. And I would read my pieces a little at a time, one at a time, not in any order. She could never know where I was going with it. I had a sort of idea in my head where I was going with it.
Did
Jonathan,
the story ever run away with you, or did you control it the whole time?
I was in control the whole time.
Yeah.
And then there's huge chunks I took out because I decided I had to taper it. In fact, Jonathan knows, he read it in an early stage. I think I probably cut, I don't know, 30,000 words after that. So the poor guy had to read all those. And then when he read it again, it's in a whole different order.
A lot of our authors tend to use some of that content. So for any of you guys that do have some stuff laying on the cutting room floor, that cutting room floor content also often finds its way into blogs, into blog posts, give you kind of more background on the work and for readers and stuff. So that would be a fun thing to do. Although I already do love your blog. Tell us a little bit about your blog. I think you do a great job with that.
Thank you. Well, it was tough, and this is something Sherry helped me figure out, which is how to do this kind of I had a blog before when I was professor. I had one devoted to media, which nobody ever went to. And I was pretty much talking about political things at the time. This one, I started out really not knowing what to talk about, but now I've got sort of a groove. I like writing about nature and finding parallels between the natural world and the human world. I think that's mostly, if anybody's read my swan stories, you know what I'm saying.
So tell me about this. Is I think one of the most intriguing things about the book. I mean, it's a cover, obviously, that wants to just completely invite you in, but the title is very unique. How did you decide on that?
Too bad Steve's not here. It was his idea.
Oh, okay.
we were brainstorming. In fact, we brainstormed on the cover as well.
Okay.
But the idea is Sylvie is denied and she denies. So here's, and that's part of the story arc too, is that, classic sort of storyline, the character has a goal and has a person that has a character flaw or characteristic that is working hard to prevent her from reaching that goal. That's sort of, so she is denied and she denies. So even though she's trying to find the truth, she's also preventing herself from noticing it or seeing the reality that she's in.
And what of you as the author went into the character of Sylvie?
What I like to say is these are not stories of my life, but stories from my life. Certainly, the internal, it's an internal monologue, really, written in third person. So Sylvie is thinking, all the things Sylvie's thinking about are things that I've thought about, of course. And so in that sense, it's very much me. If that answers your question. There's also, sort of the her struggle with irony. And that was something true of myself. I never got why people were saying something but not meaning it. It took me years to figure that out. I think I was concrete operational for a long time. If you know that term from Piaget, that I wasn't thinking abstractly as a young kid. And I don't know.
Are you also an artist?
Yeah. I have, I've done portrait painting, I've done oils, watercolors, some on commission, a few that I've sold.
Wonderful. Do you still get to devote time to that, or is the book taking up your whole life now?
I gave away, when we moved 500 miles. And before that, I have a son-in-law actually living in Arizona. I sent him all of my art material, most of my art materials. And what was left, I gave to a kid I knew who was going to art school, Cooper Union, I think. And so he got my art books and whatever, my easel and other stuff. So if I'm going to start it up again, I'd have to start from scratch. But
Yeah.
I have to say, my art evolved into garden design in the 90s. I saw that as like 4-dimensional art, because it's the 3 dimensions plus time. And I had a partner for 20 years. We did, it was 20 years. We started in 89. And we got commissions. We were called the Girls. It's quite a story. In the Baltimore area, we were known as the Girls because there weren't that many women in the field.
Okay.
Literally.
So I'm going to take a couple questions from the chat room now. So Deborah asks, you talk about restrictions Sylvie faces in terms of what she can become. Are some of those restrictions self-imposed?
Perhaps. You mean in the character, or you're talking about the character? Maybe. I mean, there were parameters. So I think Sylvie had certain parameters and certain choices that were important to her. The restrictions I'm really talking about are the legal expectations. I suppose in those days, there were women who were the first in their field, the first to go to Ivy League, male-dominated Ivy League schools, the first women in law firms and that sort of thing. And that kind of thing isn't self-imposed. But so, I'd like to hear more from about Deborah's question.
Well, I have another question here. As someone who has known you since childhood, I'm wondering whether this constituted an internal search, or were you thinking, wow, I've got a story here I want to tell?
I think I did kind of touch on that a little bit, but I guess it's a little of both. The internal search, I mean, as I said, one of the things that has long time fascinated me, and it kind of led me to go into the field that I got my doctorate in, which is intercultural communication, which is how do you know who you really are? And I taught this too. And I would tell students, I'd say, imagine you were born on an island. You're the only human there. Who are you? How do you know? Like, what is there something that's intrinsic in yourself that's you? Or are you reflecting messages you're getting from your family, from your culture, et cetera, et cetera. And so I went, after my freshman year, I decided I wanted to live in another country and learn another language and learn to think in another language, to the extent that I would come up against, and it did happen, come up against my assumptions. Basic things like, I mean, just stupid things like, you should brush your teeth. Of course you should brush your teeth. Everybody knows that. Well, why? Look, I would be told, I have no cavities. Look at you. Your mouth is full of cavities. I don't brush my teeth and you do. So, those sorts of things would be challenged. What people take as truth is, it's just interesting to live in another culture. Probably Malve can speak about too. I don't know.
Yeah.
That you're challenged if you allow yourself to be, if you really immerse into it.
So why is the setting in Italy important to the story?
Probably, I mean, mainly because that's where I had most of my intercultural, international experience. I do speak Italian, to the point where people would stop me on the street and ask me directions and think I was from that city. So, and I dreamt in Italian. So yeah, and and some of the, plus I think in the book, some of those settings like Busana Vecchia, Mantua, are just fascinating places, and I couldn't not speak about them. So if I hadn't ever seen them, I'd want to invent a place like either one of those. I mean, Mantua, where everybody was a woman. I mean, there was only one man left surviving after the 40s. And then Busana Vecchia, which is this incredible, if any of you go to Italy, you have to go to both these places. But Busana Vecchia is an artist colony, and you can actually now see it on Google Maps. They've got a way that you can see a city that has no streets with no traffic. You can look at the sidewalks. And I was really intrigued when I was able to actually go and like kind of walk through the city. It's a stone city. If you've read the book, I don't know if it's a spoiler to talk about Busana Vecchia, but
oh, that's amazing. No. So I'm going to ask you, what, if you had to pick just one thing, and I know that there are, several themes running through the book and places and people, but if you had to take give us one takeaway, what would you like readers to take away from their experience with Sylvie Denied?
Well, other than what I've already talked about, I think the whole transformation from being a daughter into being a mother is a key theme. And then seeing how much of the baggage of being a daughter and the sort of, I don't know if I'd call it animus, but the kind of conflict of mother-daughter, how much of that is she aware that she may be repeating with her own daughter? She does, she thinks about that at a certain point, but is it already too late by then?
Excellent. So what we're gonna do is open this up for some verbal Q&A and just kind of have a little bit of conversation. I'm going to stop the recording when I do that. So before I go to the conversation part, I would just like to invite everybody, all of our readers, everybody out there. I know several of you have already picked up a copy at the bookstore, but check it out. It really is a lot of fun. Sylvie Denied is for sale anywhere where fine books are sold. Yeah. And with that, we're going to stop the recording and open it up. Thank you all for being here.